Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a second council meeting for today. One to receive public input about the municipality's 2026 fees and charges. And I'll just open the meeting by asking you to observe a moment of silent reflection with me. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? See none, but if it occurs to you, please bring it forward at that time. And I will now call the meeting to order. This public meeting is to receive public input about the municipality's proposed 2026 fees and charges. Council will not be making any decisions on this matter today. First, I'm going to ask Valerie Manning, our treasurer, to give a brief overview of the fees and charges process. Valerie?
Hi, Mayor Kenner. So we started the fees and charges process in and around September of 2025. We brought all departments had a chance to review their specific fees for their specific departments, and that's how we build the numbers into our budget. So then we brought forward in November 2025, we tabled the fees and charges. Council was able to review them at that time. After that, council chose to have another public meeting regarding the fees and charges on December 9th. At that time, you had further review of the fees and charges. And today we're hosting the statutory public meeting that needs to take place for that. Most of the fees we tried to keep at that 2% increase. There are a few that maybe vary from that, but most of them are hopefully at 2%. So today, if we have no more comments, what will happen is going to the January 26, 2026 meeting will be the bylaw to adopt the fees and charges for the 2026 year. Is there any questions regarding that?
Members of council, any questions? Okay. Thank you very much, Valerie. There have been no pre-registrations to speak at this meeting by members of the public tonight. And I'm looking to see if there's anybody in the gallery who would like to have the opportunity to speak, and I see no one. No one who is a member of the public and not part of the corporate structure here. So next I will come back to council and ask if you have any comment or questions at all regarding fees and charges for 2026. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two problem areas with the proposed charges that we have in front of us. And certainly I've mentioned one before, and that was the elimination after July 1st, 2026 of the $4 bag tag. It's very, very difficult for me to argue this situation because I would love to be able to put out a bag of garbage with no bag tag on it. However, having said that, and I know a lot of other people would be glad to do that too, the bag tags have been an integral part of our waste management program now for at least 15 years. Started with a $2 tag, and they have increased in price. But it was a main component back when we started recycling, started into the blue box, started to reduce our waste management costs. We introduced the bag tags to, well, partially help pay for the cost of waste management, partially to help pay for the cost of dumping at the Forman landfill site. there's just so much history with the tags. I think, even though a lot of people, object to the four-door tags, it has been worthwhile. Fairly easy perhaps for myself to say because my wife and I usually only put out a bag of garbage once a month, so it's not a big cost to us. But I do think the revenue from the bag tags and Ms. Manning can correct me on this, but I think we usually got around $185,000 a year from bag tags. Now, that was, of course, put towards the cost of getting rid of the bags of garbage. Anyway, that one, I guess to me, the system is not broken, so I don't know why we're fixing it. The other item, if I may, Your Worship, deals with Meaford Hall and the community costs of Meaford Hall. The community rate, they're set to jump considerably. And I can understand some increase, but the rate, for instance, at the Opera House, 900 to 1120 for 4 hours, 9 hours, 1100 to 1400. The rental of the galleries, considerable jumps. I could see some increase. I think what is suggested is exorbitant, and it's going to be damaging again to our community groups. Arts and culture does not pertain only to the wealthy. It doesn't pertain to big acts, to celebrities. To me, it pertains to local users, local performers at the hall. And these kind of numbers are, for many, just too high. Okay, that's my 2 cents worth, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And do we want to have some discussion of the 2 points that he's raised here? I think we should try and resolve the issues he's raised. And I have a comment, if nobody else does, on the bag tag. And I totally understand where I think Councillor Greenfield is coming from, and a lot of people who have, the only hue and cry has come from people who are saying, don't do away with the bag tags because it'll only just encourage, people to create more garbage. I look at it a little differently, and I just suggest to you that $4 is not very much, but you don't want to go to the grocery store every time you need a bag tag. And I think the average household doesn't buy any less than 10, which means that on 1 week when you're grocery shopping, you have to fork out $40 for bag tags. And that's where I think there's an impact that, trying this at least and giving people a chance to have one free bag and $4 for tags after that. I think that it is something that might be appreciated and should be tried. That's my comment. Deputy Mayor?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I know I've expressed this thought before, but in my mind, it's one way of providing a little bit of relief for people, recognizing that taxes are going to go up. We don't know to what degree yet, but they're going to go up. And we know our user pay for those that are impacted with water and wastewater bills, those are going to go up. And I think this is one way that we can recognize that is a hardship for some, and for others, they'll certainly notice that impact. And this is just one way to give people a little bit of a break and say that, you can get one free bag, noting that the second tags and so on from there will be an additional expense, but I think it will encourage people to recycle enough that they can limit their garbage to the one bag. So I think there are a number of ways to look at this, but I'd like to see us try it and see what the reaction is from people and analyze it at the time of the next budget. So I'm in favor of it. Thank you.
Councillor Forder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, Deputy Mayor, I appreciate your comments, and I just want to sort of piggyback on that. And so how I look at it is having the first bag for free can really sort of be a step in the right direction in terms of sustainability and reducing waste. And I believe our CAO had mentioned this when we talked about this a while back, is that if you can start being more aware of how we're consuming and what we're wasting, and we can fit that into one bag as opposed to two bags, that's a step in the right direction for sustainability. It may not be perfect, but I think this is something that we definitely should try. And I know this is implemented in a lot of municipalities where it actually is quite successful. I know I did talk to a resident who was concerned that, well, if the second bag is now $8, it's going to encourage more illegal dumping. And I did a bunch of research and that data is not supported anywhere. But I do think if we want to be a sustainable minded municipality and we want to start making moving the needle in that direction, I think this is something that is definitely worth trying for a period of time. If we can just get people to be more aware of how we are consuming and what we're wasting, it could be a step in the right direction. So I'm perfectly fine with this, at least to try it out for now. And if we need to revisit it and make some changes, then we will do that.
Councillor Ennis.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. To the aspect of trying it, I wonder if there is an avenue where we could get like a measurement of whether there is a change in the amount of waste being disposed of, and then that could inform future decision making. I don't know if that would incur an additional cost, but
through your worship, we do get tonnage information annually, and we actually have to report it to the government. So we can definitely look at what this year's tonnage is based in comparison to previous year's ones, as well, just to identify. As of right now, with the information we have, we think the second bag tag, like the second bag, so a bag tag would cost approximately $5.50. So it's more than what we're currently at, but it's not as high as the doubling it at an $8 increase. So there's also that benefit as well, is that even additional bag tags, you know, while still costing more, aren't going to be at a point where people potentially see illegal dumping as their route of disposal.
as an additional thought too, sort of perhaps maybe going in the opposite direction. I'd be worried about trying it and then deciding that we'd like to bring tags back and then have to go through the process of bringing tags back. So I feel like if we're going to try it, we're not just trying it, we're kind of committing to it. And I recall, I don't know if I made this up, but I feel like somebody had mentioned when we last talked about this, that it's possible we'll be getting the like mechanical dumping bins. Is that a likely scenario?
Through your worship, so our current contract with Miller Waste is how we currently see pickup. So if there's any changes, which could come in the future with future contracts, there would be lots of information coming before that, before it's happening. So as of right now, there is no change being made.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And one further thought, I think as well, and I don't have it in front of me, but the list that we received with recyclable items, now that list has been expanded. There are more items that can go in for recycling, you know, the film wrap, the aerosol cans, the deodorants, the toothpaste tubes, and so on. So I think that takes a number of things out of the garbage. So I think that helps people, you know, be able to just put out that one bag. So I appreciate your point, Councillor Ennis, that, you know, I know I sort of talked around the idea of a trial, but you know, I don't disagree that if we do this, it's hard to come back from. It's hard to make that change again. So, but I'm still in favor of going forward with one free bag, and you know, certainly future councils can reanalyze this, but I think it'll work, and I think people will appreciate it, and I think that's one thing that people can say about this council is they did get a free bag of garbage.
Councillor Porter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you once again. With regards to the wastewater fee increase, and I'm appreciative that staff were able to take this direction and reduce from 8% to 5%. Just maybe for those that could be listening, maybe staff could comment on what changes, if any, were made to the sort of the underlying cost recovery model in order to achieve a 5% increase versus an 8% increase. Just for the layperson to get a better understanding of what would be involved in that.
Can I just ask that before we, you
Yep.
know, deal with that we sort of finish this discussion, because I'm going to ask Councillor Greenfield, did you want to make a motion on the bag tag issue, or, oh, we're not deciding anything tonight? When would we decide that? At budget discussions?
Thank you, Your Worship. The next step is, as the treasurer indicated, would be that this would come to a council meeting, and at that point in the council meeting, motions as usual could be made. So that will be deliberated
Okay.
on January 26th is our intention.
So there's a distinction between a public meeting and a council meeting. Thank you. So we know where that stands. And did anyone want to just comment on Councillor Greenfield's other point, which I've almost forgotten what it was?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Greenfield. I appreciate there hasn't been an increase at Meaford Hall since 23, I believe. And I have no problem with commercial increases because that's who should be paying for Meaford Hall. I agree with Councillor Greenfield, and I think small increases are warranted. I feel that these are rather severe. I can tell you, I know the rumblings in the community are the United Church is getting more bookings. Other facilities are getting more bookings because people don't want to pay more. So are we actually defeating the purpose if the local groups are actually going to other places to rent as opposed to the galleries or the terrace room or the opera house? That's self-defeating because we're actually losing money then by driving them somewhere else. So we're not making any motions here, obviously, but I'm also going to be looking at hopefully decreasing that increase somewhat at a future meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Renz?
Is there any, can anyone say whether or not the current rate, is it just cost recovery, or is it actually a profit from community groups? Because I'm just thinking if they are unfortunately driven away, which I wouldn't like to see, but if they were, does it actually affect bottom line?
Through Mr. Mayor. So when we looked at the increases, the goal was to lower the deficit for the Meaford Hall on an annual basis. And by looking at that, the opportunity to increase rates was the key aspect. But that being said, this is at council's discretion. Council can take a look at those rates and go back to the way they were in 2025. That's your prerogative. From a staff perspective, we were and I am concerned about making sure that Meaford Hall stays within a realm of acceptability for a deficit. There's currently discussions going on about where should the emphasis lie on marketing. Obviously, the commercial piece is trying to get commercial in there to help offset the deficit. The other thing with the community bookings, I do know that council previously has had an interest in looking at subsidization of community groups. So I just, as you subsidize more groups, you also lower the overall revenue coming to the hall. So, if these groups are concerned about the increase, these groups, could also ask for a subsidy. and that subsidy may take us closer to the 2025 rate. But I just, it's a slippery slope with subsidies because, I think, the engagement of the residents and our stakeholders and community groups within Meaford is a pretty phenomenal uptake and I think it's a great thing for the community. We are looking at bringing the policy forward for a subsidy policy, which, for a lot of these groups, they would get captured within that subsidy rate. Which, if those individual groups go elsewhere, one thing I would look at, and I've done this before, is sometimes groups will move and realize that where they've moved to is actually the more appropriate sized and more appropriate venue, which, helps everybody. But I would hate for the change being made because of the pricing and them going to a less appropriate building. So there is that fine line, but from a staff perspective, we were just trying to bring forward recommendations that helped with the overall deficit to the facility. Understanding this is an extremely important building for the municipality. It's a jewel. Jewels come at a cost as well, so it's just trying to maintain a level of affordability.
Can I just ask a very quick question? Is the hall operating at a deficit? I understand that we haven't finished paying for it, but is it operating at a deficit?
Yeah, it'll be operating as a deficit. And the reality is, as a municipality, most of our facilities will be operating as a deficit. That's what taxpayers' dollars pay for. And then that's what the argument has always been for those individuals who do not use the hall. Your tax dollars are paying for the hall that you may not use on a regular basis.
I can understand the arena not operating at a profit. I would hope that we will see a day when the Meaford Hall is operating at a profit.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be an interesting business plan to go through because your operational costs in the Meaford Hall are significant. So, I'm looking forward to working with council to create a business plan for all facilities to understand what is the acceptable level of taxpayer subsidy for facilities. And that is a fulsome review of a per hour cost for every facility that we have. And then determining what is the acceptable level of subsidy that the taxpayer would fund, which ultimately gives council far more information to be making decisions on, because then you would know how much per hour would the taxpayer be picking up the difference on. And it will vary. The pool will vary. The arena absolutely will vary. The hall will vary. And we'll see that in the harbor, because when we start looking at Memorial Park and the harbor, which are supposed to be full user fee recovery, those are the numbers that I'm quite interested, because that's what, if they're full cost recovery, that's what we should be billing and charging our slips out. We should be billing our campsites out if we truly are focused on a full cost recovery. So
I think council would welcome that report, and you just made yourself more work, I'm sure, but thank you. Councillor Yurigan and Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Sean. I agree 100%. It makes sense. You don't want it to be a massive loss leader, but like the library, this is a vital kind of meeting spot performance. It is a showcase for me. So what you brought up a very interesting point. I would love to see what that deficit figure is, because if the deficit figure is substantial, then doubling the galleries and terrace room is not going to make it up. It isn't going to come close to making it up. And when you talk about subsidizing, it's okay that we subsidize the arena, which definitely is a loss leader. But we don't do it for something that actually probably has more people go through it and is much more of a showcase for us visibly. So that's where my concern is, that I really believe that this building is an entity unto itself. The pool, the arena, we know they're not making money. They're there as services. Not everybody uses them. Other people's taxpayers, money dollars that are not using the pool and the arena are paying for those as well. We don't use that argument for those. So I have a little bit of a concern of paying that argument for this because it's equal in reverse. So it'll be a long, but it would be nice to know what that deficit is for Meaford Hall, just to see what that figure looks like. And what this kind of fits into that. Because I don't think this is gonna make up the difference.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks, Your Worship, again. Up until COVID struck, which affected a great many items, certainly entertainment involved, but the deficit, operating deficit was coming down for at least 2 or 3 years. It was still there, a deficit, but it was getting a little more balanced. Just briefly, another beside the point, in case our public wonders what council members are actually doing at the Roma conference. One of the concurrent sessions on Sunday afternoon is strengthening rural vitality through arts and culture. And that's what I'm hoping to sit in on, because I think it has a direct connection with what we're talking about for Meaford Hall and all of our venues. So thank you.
So can I come back now to Councillor Forder, who had a question? And so you had a question for CAO Everett on the change in the rate for or
Yes.
the relative increase in was it sewer?
The
Water.
wastewater. Yes, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for indulging me. Yeah, I was just looking for some comment, just so we could understand behind the scenes how staff were able to reduce the wastewater rate from 8 to 5, and what that looks like, just so we have a better perspective. Thank you.
Through your worship, as that change was being made, we were working on just finalizing some of our capital project budgets. And so what we have done is we have just had to push some of the funding for those projects to future years. A lot of our water and wastewater projects are quite significant, and so they are funded over multiple years. And so what we have done is just worked within the budget we have available for 2026, utilizing that slightly reduced rate, and then had to show some of that additional funding in future years, and again pushing out into potentially a third year for some of those projects so that we can fund the whole project. So the cost of the project is the same. We've just had to look at how many years it's going to cost to actually pay off the work that needs to be done.
Councillor Bell, and sorry.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So one of the things on the water and the wastewater is, we even have the editor of the Meaford Independent writing in a column that he gets folks coming up to him and talking about the fees and the water and what's costing. And the municipality advertises that we have a meeting and we have no one. And it's left up to us just on our own to talk amongst ourselves what we think we should be doing. And it's a little disappointing that when people do have an opportunity to come out and have their say, they would rather just either get on their iPad or something and send a message. Well, what I want to know in a sense is, on this council, we have folks that use the water and the wastewater. You're an urban dweller. So I looked at the minimum monthly bill that you get for your water and the minimum monthly bill you get for your waste. Then I just chose 0 to 10 cubic meters. I multiplied that up and I come up with pretty close to $3,000 a year. Now, for those of you who are urban dwellers, is that close to what you are currently paying now? Is it in the neighborhood of $3,000? Do you get away a lot less? I'd like to know.
Mayor, I don't mind saying mine would be around $1,800 a year, but I'm just one person living alone.
Most of you are underneath that 10 cubic meters then. That's kind of where you're at in your homes. So with that being said, and we read where the residents out in Leith are given a flat rate of $6.18, and that's where they are because they chose to live in Leith, and that's what they're getting. So when I read in the Meaford Independent, those that sent in comments saying about how expensive everything is, again, as a user fee, you urban dwellers are not hitting $3,000 a year.
I think
Your
we are
consumption
probably-
rate
I
is
think-
based upon what you're using. So it does add to what your family or your household has to pay. There is no question. Now, I've stated here before that the quality of the delivered water. So I have family that live in Owen Sound, and I talked about this. They told me in their family unit that they are paying more than this. And I was surprised by that. Larger city, more people, more volume, and so on. And they told me what they were paying. Family of 4. So when I see this and I read some of the comments about what the folks are paying, I also have said many times out in the rural community, that bill's on the rural community person, our wells and our septics, our maintenance of our own pumps, everything like that. And then we have to send our water in, or we should send our water in 2 or 3 times a year for testing. So what we're delivering, I'm going to say it one more time. I truly believe that what is being delivered to the residents who use the system, they are getting great value for what they're getting. It's guaranteed, and it's beautiful water. And I think that the rates here that we've got, bearing in mind, the heavy note is the wastewater treatment plant. We were on this council and we had a member of senior staff sitting not too far to my left, who, when the issue came up of a presentation about the wastewater treatment plant, the comment was, and I'm going to be pretty close to this, council should have been planning on this years ago. That's a beautiful statement, and that's being long in the tooth, and we need to be long in the tooth on this ourselves. We need to plan for the future. Our staff have done a wonderful job finding us some room. They have done excellent work. They have been very creative on how to find capacity. But that doesn't excuse the situation that in the future, some council here is going to have some person come and give a report, and the number is going to be in the neighborhood likely pretty close to $400 million planning today for that event. So we need to stay the course. And anyway, these rates that I see, what's been proposed here, I'm not a user of the system, but I am comfortable with the numbers.
I will say, I am not the finance minister at home. My good wife takes all that off my shoulders, but I think that we're in the neighborhood of $3,000 in water, yes. And the other thing is, great as our water is, ever since my wife had cancer, we have had to buy our water from the water store because it just, the after effects, it bothered her during the trials, and it still bothers her. So we buy our water, and the hardest part is carrying those 50-pound bottles around. Yeah, I do, but what a lot of people don't understand is, I read recently, and I think it was in the Independent, where somebody said, heavens, in Kitchener, we were paying just a fraction of what we're paying here. Well, what kind of a fraction more does the municipality of Kitchener have compared to the municipality of Meaford? And it's just simple economics, Anyway, we've been through that quite a few times. You had a question, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did have a question on the community rates, but I'm just going to leave that because we've moved on to water and wastewater. And I absolutely agree with Councillor Bell. The quality of our water is just absolute perfection. It's just the best water around. And so we're very fortunate to have that. And I don't know if our CIO is prepared to speak to it today or not, but a question that we talked about earlier today was, you know, what that 8% and 5%, what that real impact is on our bills, because I'm not afraid to admit that after 11 years on this council, I'm not sure I fully understood that actual impact to each member of the public, what those percentages actually mean to people's bills. So I know the CIO had mentioned we might get into that when we have that budget day, and that may still be the best approach, but just so everyone knows that is a question that I'm not sure everybody else may say, yep, they understand that, but I'm not afraid to say that I don't, and perhaps some members of our public are not totally clear on that either. So I'll just leave that to Sean to see if he wants to speak to that now today or leave it until February the 6th.
Through Mr. Mayor to the Deputy Mayor. I do agree that, you know, through this process, there needs to be a very clear layman term breakdown of what your bill actually entails, right from the consumption part or the treatment part to the capital replacement part. Because part of your bill is the capital replacement cost of the infrastructure. And then I think also just the ability to really identify, you know, what is the average consumption of the average home for water? Because if to your point, Councillor Bell, if you're falling in a typical consumption, the bill's not too bad. But if you are a high user of water for any number of reasons, you could be a gardener, you could have immaculate grass because you water your grass all the time. Those who are using a lot of water are paying for that use of the water. And same thing on the other side. If you have a house and you have 2 bathrooms and both of those toilets are, having the flap open, not only are you going to get billed on the consumption of water, but you're going to get billed on the treatment, right? So there's lots of things that puts the responsibility back into the individual property owner. And it's hard to give that responsibility to the property owner unless they actually know what they're paying for. And, a responsibility of staff is to make sure, and, when we talk about the wastewater treatment plant, like it's our responsibility to make sure that when we're talking development charges, that our development charges are basing the cost of that wastewater treatment plant expansion on real factual numbers. Because that is actually what we should be setting our development charges on. Will not be a pleaser for those people building homes, because it will drive the development charges costs for that water treatment portion. But I'm a firm believer, development needs to pay for development. It's not fair for the existing taxpayer to be paying for the bulk of a wastewater treatment expansion because they're already here. They're already using this system. And that's why development charges were brought in for future development to pay for the future growth. So, and again, when we talk about the wastewater treatment plant, that should not, and it will, but it should not see a huge increase to the existing users, but it will see an increase because once that installation is put in place, now you have all of this new capital that you have to replace. So that's where the existing user should be on the hook for that replacement of that new infrastructure 50, 75 years down the line. But we need to do a better job of communicating and make it very, very clear to the resident, this is how your bill is made up. And, when you're doing reconstruction projects, I always say, like, everybody's worried about the sidewalk and everybody worried about the curb and the pavement. Those are rounding errors in the project. It's everything that's under the ground is the cost. And that cost is good for 50, 60, 75 years. Then you got to replace it. And I believe we were in a council meeting not too long ago when that discussion was, when you put it in the ground, it's not forever. And we have to understand that the amount of infrastructure that we as a municipality, and we're a young municipality, forever and a day, we're going to be replacing infrastructure, and that's not getting any cheaper. So all of that is really put into sight when we start looking at our rates. But federal funding, DC funding, we need to do a really good job of making sure that we're collecting those dollars that actually benefit our local existing residents.
Dory?
Through your worship, and just to add a little bit more context to Robert CAO's comment, for the wastewater treatment plant expansion specifically, part of that project, which doesn't fall under those DC charges, as well as that we do have some existing components that will need to be replaced as well because they have reached end of life, and so will be kind of incorporated into it. So there'll be expansion costs that are related to DC, or that will be paid for through DCs, but anything that is being replaced will be the existing users. And so that's where you'll sometimes see that there are some costs that are associated back to the existing users, is that there are some replacement items that will be the existing, like replacing existing infrastructure. High level with regards to the increased rate, identifying a 5% increase. Or I guess 2 years ago now, in 2024, a rate study presentation was brought forward in front of council, and it had identified a 5% increase to the water rates over a period of 2025 to 2033. And just to provide a little bit of information from that, in that it identified that that a water bill, assuming in 2024, if somebody's water bill was $1,068, with that 5% increase annually, your water bill in 2033 would be $1,656. And then it has some wastewater information as well, but the increases recommended were not 5% annually in that. So it's a little bit different. There was a 12% increase from 2025 to 2027, and then a 5% increase from 2028 to 2033. So with those, which obviously is a higher increase than what we're looking at right now, those showed that the average residential user would see a bill of $952 in 2024, going up to $1,794. So that's what those percentage increases look like. And we can obviously dig in more because it depends on how we allocate out different funds, what those funding models look like. And we are right now actually revising some of this information and planning to bring it forward with the asset management plan. So there'll be some more opportunity for council to see these numbers and ask some more questions on them.
Councillor Bell?
Thanks again, Mr. Mayor. So thank you, CAO, for making sure that I had an understanding on the DC charges. I think when I was talking, I was probably missing that. That was a key point. So thank you for that. One of the things that I am going to ask is, if people are having trouble with their wastewater bills, is there another way that the municipality can still get paid for what they're using? But I'm thinking, can we put it in on their taxes? Can we do something different? Are there other avenues that maybe the end user would feel that there's a bit of relief? Is there other latitude on how to do the water and wastewater billing? Or do we wish to keep it straight up? So what you've been saying, you see it and you know it if it gets molded into something else. But I had someone ask me, can you roll it into something different where I might not feel the crunch as much?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bell, I personally think the way that we do it's probably the best, just because it is a user fee. So you want to keep it separated from the property taxes, just because a good percentage of our residents will never have that fee on their taxes. But because it's a user fee, it's just like any other bill that you get. You can you can take a look at your bill. And again, you need to be able to understand it. But if you look at your bill and you can understand it, you may also figure out ways that you can lower your bill. Right? Like some bills you look at, well, I don't need that channel. So I'll get rid of that channel. I'm going to lower my bill. With water, it's pretty simple. How can I reduce the consumption of my water? And it could be a rain barrel. It could be don't water your grass as much. So there's, again, it's that individual property owner's responsibility and opportunity to look at the bill and say, wow, this is high. How can I reduce that bill? And it really is in how can I lower the consumption? It's like a propane bill. If your propane bill is super high, you start looking at what, do I have a leaky? I've heard of this story before. Geez, I've got my barbecue piped right into my propane and my propane bill is super high. I'm going to check my barbecue, right? It could very well be you have a bunch of leaky taps. And the combination of that over 24 hours a day, 365 days, that's a lot of water. And to be honest with you, we want you to fix your tap because that's water that's actually going into the wastewater, right? So it's all connected. But again, having the resident understand fully what that bill includes, I think is something that we can do a better job on.
Just talking about watering lawns made me think of this. Given that I think we're all pretty united in wanting to encourage people to use less water, and just thinking back on the last 2 summers being extremely dry. I don't know what the bylaws are about yard maintenance at the moment because it doesn't really apply to me, but I just want to make sure that things are well aligned so that somebody who is letting their lawn go brown won't be penalized by the municipality for that.
Yeah, so through Mr. Mayor, and it's a great point. The sustainability lens, you want to make sure that people are conserving water. In Meaford, we use so little of our treated water. On the business side, I'm saying water your lawn all day because we just want people using the water because that will actually lower, right? So there's better ways of doing it. There's looking at our neighbors to say, can we provide you with water? But the property maintenance and the noxious weed bylaws, we want to make sure somebody who is conserving water isn't getting penalized or fined for having brown grass. So it's, we're in a unique situation. Many municipalities and locally go into the water conservation because they simply don't have the water to be able to go on lawns. So, and that's where you start seeing the every other day watering. So we don't have that issue, but the sustainability lens, we also just don't want treated water getting put on lawns as well. So hopefully that's helpful.
Anyway, you had a question, another question, Deputy Mayor. Okay. Any other questions? Okay,
I just have a couple points and just with a quick review.
sure.
I thought it would be helpful because it is a public meeting. Members of the public may be watching, but just want to give you. This goes back to the hall, Meaford Hall. So just with a brief review of the 2025 numbers. So the arena and community hall. So the St. Vincent facility. It has a deficit, a budgeted deficit of roughly $665,000 a year is what the arena and the hall run as a deficit. Blue Dolphin Pool for 2025 had a budgeted deficit of 86,000. It's actually pretty good for a pool. The museum has a 2025 budgeted deficit of 300,000. The Meaford Hall has a budgeted deficit for 2025 of approximately $400,000. And then the library, just to include it in sort of the community services and its social aspect, library has a 2025 budgeted deficit of 840,000. So those are some of your key, recreational, social, cultural facilities. I just thought it was opportune just to provide that through a public meeting. So when we start looking at user fees, those are real numbers and those are coming from 2025. So that's what council approved in 2025. So hopefully that's helpful information.
Councillor Yurg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the 400K for Meaford Hall, how does the outstanding debt affect that? Is that separate from that? And that's in long-term debt, or is that inclusive of the debt outstanding on the renovation?
So by the look of the budget, it looks like in 2027, that roughly 400,000 drops down to about 320,000. And that would be basically the debt being paid off. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's very helpful. Now, how close are you to being done? Do you have other issues you want to talk about? Councillor Ennis?
Thank you. Just I've been thinking about the hall and just bringing it up again. I was thinking about how to sort of approach whether we do subsidies and keep the higher rate or drop the rate and do less subsidies. And I was wondering what the appetite would be, especially from those that are more kind of have the hobby of culture things, what people would feel about implementing some kind of advertising revenue and then using that advertising revenue to issue subsidies. So we could keep the rate as it is, have some type of advertising program, and then take that money and then subsidize community groups with that. Essentially sponsorships, like how a newspaper or radio station would do it. I don't know if there's the appetite from the community or those involved to do that. It is nice to go somewhere not be advertised at.
I think too that
but it
we
is-
are quite fortunate. There are some excellent sponsors in the municipality of Meaford who do support a lot of our community events and that type of thing. So it'd be great if we can, derive more.
Mhm.
But it's not as if it's being overlooked or as if we don't have the sponsors there who are very supportive.
Well, I mean more like a specific advertising program, like putting up a banner in exchange, like almost like a rink board at the hall, or a pre-show, I don't know, like commercial kind of thing, like at a movie theater, like things kind of like that, that would be more as a product, like we're offering to advertise or display their advertisements, as opposed to it being more of a form of charitable support.
I think we're all trying to noodle it, but anyway, no, I certainly understand the signboard analogy. Sure. Councillor York.
I like, yeah, so the arena, you walk in the curling club, there's obviously banners all over the place. And that helps offset some of the curling club costs, et cetera. Yeah, I'm just not sure how you do that at Meaford Hall without making it look like a racing car.
Yeah.
Which is kind of detrimental to the whole purpose of the hall being a kind of showpiece and a art gallery. So I mean, valid thing to try and generate income from advertising, absolutely. Just not sure that, yeah, the banner signage placement's kind of the way. Having said that, I mean, already Meaford Hall shows upcoming shows prior to every concert. There's no reason why you couldn't say, yeah, let's advertise that. Let's have companies pay for space on that and have that as actual advertising dollars. Go to the hall.
CEO of it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And to Councillor Ennis's point, one thing that I've seen municipalities do very effectively is when we look at our capital projects and our capital planning and even additions, those are where municipalities are starting to go to the private sector and looking for the sponsors on those projects. The best example I have seen in my career is actually the new Hanover Fire Department. There is not a room in that Hanover Fire Department that isn't sponsored by some company. And it's incredible how much money they actually got in the construction of that building that was paid by the private sector. And companies that make total sense, like their fire training room, I believe was sponsored by an insurance company, right? But those are ways that we can actually reduce the overall expenditures if we can get the private sector to help fund capital projects, because it expands our ability to use our reserves, which at the end of the day lowers the actual cost burden and also allows for our budgeting to really be more operational in some aspects and less capital if we can get some of those projects paid for. And that's something that we've been trying to do even with some of the MOUs that we've been creating, that if you want to get, the 35% off, what projects will you actually help the municipality pay for in the future? So it is a sponsorship function. The arena has a good sponsorship program. The problem is, when you have a sponsorship program like that in the arena, that typically, it's a couple $100 a year for a sign. Trying to get good funding from signage and other, because it'll be, well, why are you asking me for 1,000 when I can get a sign in the arena for a couple hundred? So, but I really do like the opportunities with the funding of capital and using those as naming rights and that sort of thing, because that example of the Hanover Fire Department it's a pretty awesome example of how they've utilized the private sector.
And you might want to think about this, Councillor Ehrig. Grey Roots has gone that route in the last year or so to try and deal with the deficit they were experiencing. And I think that there is a lot of merit in that.
Yeah, I think that idea is brilliant. I have no problem with that. If hospitals are the classic example of how that works. Name rooms, the Rotary at the library. You can do it very classy, putting up signs. And again, those are nothing. They're literally a few $100. It's not even gonna make a dent on the balance sheet. But if you can truly get angels that are now putting names, if it's the 3M Performance Center, then they're willing to pay, $50,000 for it. Well, that's different. So no, I think that's valid.
Are there any other questions, Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to go into the planning. I see, and we've all read the report, that the numbers for 2026 are the same as 2025. But one of the things that, when I was reading this, it comes before council today, this one and that, we're going to remove holding symbol number 1. Yeah, we'll remove that symbol. Not a big deal. Somebody's paying $1,800 for that. My question is, when we talk to the developers, all these numbers are put before them so they have a complete understanding. When you do that and you remove that, more money. That's all I need to know, that there's an education and they're prepared for it.
Thank you, and through you, your worship, that is a good question. So where we as staff have the opportunity to consult and pre-consult with a developer on an application, big or small, a document like the fees and charges bylaw is provided to them at the very beginning. We don't want those things to be surprises either. So we do work with the developer to make sure that those charges are very clear from the beginning.
To carry on, Mr. Mayor. So we talked about the arena. We talk about maybe ice time. What's that worth? Marketplace value. The numbers that are here, the official plan amendment at a little over $37,000. How is that within, say, Grey County? Like what I'm asking for, marketplace, 37,000. What's the take on it?
Again, through your worship, that is another good question. It's my understanding the previous director had developed these numbers based on a cost recovery model. So thinking of how many staff hours would be taken to process an official plan amendment, for example, and all of the cumulative time and effort it takes. So that was the principle that those fees and charges were developed on. Having said that, our fees are probably generally higher than our neighbors because they're not based on cost recovery. They're based generally on just comparables exclusively. So getting to CAO Everett's points before on the cost recovery, we want to make sure that development pays for development. And that means that having planning and building fees that you know, account for all of our time and effort, then that's getting to the same point.
Okay, we seem to be at the end of the line here. Any further questions, comments? Then I think I'm going to suggest that we wrap it up. And I'll just check my notes. So in closing, I just want to thank everyone for your input throughout the entire consultation process. Council will be considering the 2026 fees and charges bylaw at a future meeting. And once the bylaw is passed, notice will be provided through the municipal website. And with that, I will declare this meeting adjourned.